Hi, it's Matt Thomas from King Unique. I'm back upon the Sonic, and as you can probably tell, I am from the 80s. My glasses are from the 80s. And that's a good thing, because the folks at Sonic, they rang me up and said, Matt, are you from the 80s? And I said, yes, I am. And they said, are your glasses from the 80s? And I said, yes, they are. They said, well, that's good, because we need somebody from the 80s, preferably wearing 80s glasses, who can look at the brand new Softube Model 82. And I was like, what's that? And they were, well, as you can probably guess, it's a synthesizer because it's Softube, fair play. And they said, it's from 1982, and probably could have surmised that too. And they went, yeah, it's a recreation of the Roland SH-101. And I said, what? And they said, what? And I said, that was nearly my first analog synth. They were like, what? And I was like, what? So yeah, it's all a bit 80s, it's all a bit synth. You know, who better than an 80s synthesist to take us through this? Now, I'm going to wrap this up because I can barely see you through these glasses because being from 1989, they are scratched to the point where I can't see a thing through them. So this is all just a blurry, feely, hello, are you out there for me? I don't know. There could be nobody on the side of these glasses. It might even be a camera. So we're going to play with the synth. We're going to make noises on the synth. But of course, this being me, before we get our hands bleepy, we're going to go back in time and see who made the synth. Get ready. Roland had been bringing out SH mono synths right through the 70s, starting way back with the SH-1000 in 73, going on to include the SH-3A, SH-1, and an all-time classic, the SH-5. By the time the 80s rolled round and I was, of course, riding my skateboard to the arcade, playing Space Invaders and eating Monster Munch, the SH synths were starting to look and feel a little dated. So cue the most 80s analog mono synth of them all, the SH-101. Before you even got your hands on it, you could see that this was no 70s metal case and wooden end cheeks dinosaur. Chunky plastic, tick. A choice of achingly fashionable industrial grey, or super trendy garish primary colours, tick. Little silvery button thingies, tick. Goodbye 70s space age font, hello designer dotty 80s font, tick. In short, it was a perfect synth for dribbling Monster Munch crumbs into while skateboarding around a mall. And you could skateboard around with it because A, it could be battery powered, and B, with the extra optional MG1 hand controller and strap, you could sling it over your shoulder just like a guitar and make music on the go, as long as one of your mates didn't mind skateboarding next to you, preferably with a boombox and a long jack cable. I picked up my SH-101 in the late 80s, and it was my second analog after the truly woeful Gen SX-1000. Now, back in the 80s, I was actually more an Eddie than a Dustin. So of course I loved having a massive grey strap-on, complete with the brown suede strap for my guitar or gitboard if you prefer. And I clearly wasn't the only one, as Roland went in heavy with the strap-on for their ad campaign. Whether that was what tempted buyers, we'll never know, but Roland certainly sold bucket loads of 101s. Maybe it was partly the positioning of the 101 in Roland's 80s lineup. They included stone-cold future classics like the 707, 808 and 909 drum machines, as well as a 303 bass line, and the 202 micro composer, which is basically a slightly simplified 101 synth with a hugely expanded sequencer. Did I say expanded sequencer? Yes, the 101 also had a simple digital step sequencer, and in the age of synth pop, there was nothing more 80s than a digital CV sequencer. As we all know, the Roland XOX line went on to become the sound of 90s techno as cheap, second-hand 80s gear found its way into the hands of the first wave of bedroom producers. More flexible than a 303, and with an unmistakably solid bass end, the 101 is one of those synths like the Juno 60. It just works. Which is why we're still playing with them today, whether it's an original or one of Behringer's MS-1 clones, not to mention the numerous software recreations like Roland's own Cloud 101, or what we're looking at today, Softube's Model 82. And here it is in all its weather-beaten glory. Now the most important thing we need to deal with before we start doing anything else is of course the colour. So this arrow here, we've got red, that's pretty promising. Blue is good. It's a shame because this isn't the grey I had. Like this would have been kicked out of the 80s without any discussion. Grey in the 80s, so we're clear, is things like the Spectrum 128 Plus, big chunky dark grey. This is like being left out in the sun or something. 101s are grey, not this. So I'm going to go with the blue, I think. That's really quite accurate for the real thing, and obviously accuracy matters. We'll come back to that side panel, by the way. I'm not going to forget about it, but That's the most important thing there. You choose your colour. So here it is, the Model 82, based, as we've established, on Roland's SH101. There are a few additions here, things like tempo syncing for the LFO. We've also got some extra things here. We've got doubling, we've got overdrive. So we've got some extra toys to play with, but ultimately, 95% of this is pretty much a 101. How does it sound? Sounds quite like a 101. Really quite a lot like a 101. I'm just going to make a few presets of my own here. I won't make you watch me sit here fiddling my way through them slowly. We'll just flick through what I come up with and then we'll do an overview of what's happening on this synth after. Yeah, I've got to say this is really feeling very much like the 101 I used to have. The real grotty, raw stuff that happens when you start modulating the VCF is all very, very in the area. Probably worth mentioning as well, there's no like delay or reverb on any of these presets I've been messing with here. Let's just put some echo on. Let's just take this into tempo locked mode. So yeah, you can see straight away adding like basic effects. It starts to match up to your favorite super all-in-one synth because this is a very simple synth, but it really has loads of character and loads of kind of delivery in its sound. So let's go through it. I'm going to turn that reverb and echoey stuff off there. Okay, so it's a simple synth. It's a single oscillator setup, this VCO here. It creates 3 waveforms simultaneously. A pulse width, a sawtooth, a sub-oscillator. It also has a noise source. So those are our basic sounds. They're all coming off this one oscillator. So if I change the pitch, all 3 waveforms are moving together, right? So what have we got? We've got the sawtooth. Let's open up the filter. We've got the pulse. Now that can be controlled, the width of it here. It can either be done manually or by the LFO, this modulator, called modulator. It's basically an LFO. Or it can be swept by the envelope over here. And with the envelope and LFO setting, this slider becomes the depth of the modulation, how much sweep. So mild one, far deeper here. This modulation on the left of the VCO is for pitch, so this creates a vibrato effect, and that is controlled from the LFO again. I say vibrato, it does depend what the setting of the waveform on the LFO is. If I put it onto the triangle, we get vibrato. We can use also a square wave, a random, or a noise setting. So the square gives us a nice chip-tuney siren thing. The speed of the modulator, by the way, can be tempo synced or free. If it's free, it runs much faster at the higher settings. So as I say, the more chip-tuned end of things definitely comes out of using the LFO at a faster rate there. It's got a random setting. I'll slow it down for this. It's a nice sample and hold. Obviously sending it to the pitch, we're going to get burbling pitch wobble there, but you can send it to things like the VCF as well. We've also got a noise source. Now this is going to make quite interesting things happen to the sound. At extreme settings, sending white noise into the pitch of an oscillator creates this kind of like total tearing chaos. But the lower settings, it's quite a pleasant vibe, really. I'll just kill that mod for a second and we'll go back and just listen to the other sounds available from that oscillator. We've got a sub-osc running an octave down, or with this switch here, 2 octaves down. Or this switch here, 2 octaves down with a more complex waveform, a sort of pulse rather than a square. It's one of the classic sounds of 101, just this super fat sub sound. Now we've also got noise as a sound. Over here, noise is a modulation, but here it's just simply a white noise that we can feed into the mixer. Again, we can kill the waveforms and just do some stuff with white noise. Brings us to the filter. We've got, as you saw there, cutoff, resonance. Now the filter chip inside the 101 was the same one used in the Jupiter 8. And interestingly, the VCO is the same Curtis chip from out the Prophet 5. So it's got a lot of heritage, this synth. It's really, really going to kick out the proper fat waveforms, and then it's going to give them that bottom end, just as it... Don't want to blow your speakers, but... You can obviously make some beautiful analog kick drums on this machine. So we've got frequency, resonance, an envelope, which I'll just make a shorter sound. There we go. Modulation. So again, this LFO can be fed across this time to the filter. That's using the noise source. Let's take it onto the random again. Or the triangle. Last of all, we've got keyboard tracking so that the filter will be open at the higher end and darker at the lower end of the keyboard. Now the envelope, there's only one envelope on this synth, which is kind of a shame because you think, well, it'd be handy if I could have one envelope for the volume and another one for the filter. Well, you can't, but you sort of can at the same time. Down here, where it says VCA, we can turn the envelope off for the audio, right? And that means that the volume is just simply on, off. I've been using that so far. That's why I've been doing stuff and it hasn't been fading away despite us having a nice decay envelope here. You see that envelope's closing the filter, but we're still hearing. If I put this back up here, then the volume dies away too. So the VCA can be controlled by this envelope, or it can bypass it and then it's simply on, off, on, off, on, off. So that's kind of groovy. There's 3 settings on the envelope, whether it's triggered by gate and trig, just by gate, or by LFO. Getting your head around these is actually the key to a few nice tricks. By gate is the standard one, okay? So in this case, if I press a note, the envelope, which is currently modifying the filter, yeah, I'll make it a bit more obvious. Okay, so that sweep we're getting there, yeah? That's this envelope, right? So when I press a note, there it goes. If I put it on gate and trig and press a note, well, the same thing happens. What's the difference? Well, it's when we use it with this here, the arpeggiator. Now, we'll look at the arpeggiator in a sec, but basically, it's pretty straightforward. It's turn it on, play it. Now, each time that note's re-triggering, it's trigger, 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 yeah? It's just refiring the envelope. But look at this. If I just put it on gate, as far as the Model 82 is concerned, the fingers I'm using to play this arpeggiator, they are one gate. It's not refiring each time it creates a new note. So that means the envelope only fires once and then slowly closes whilst I hold the arpeggio. Listen. So that's quite a nice vibe. It's actually one of the more interesting things you can do with the 101 is turn this a bit faster. Almost like sort of Vangelis-y little... Let's hear that with a bit of delay as well, just for a giggle. So that's nice. It's a really unusual little feature. It's not something you think of the 101 having like sort of deep features, but actually an envelope which won't be triggered by an arpeggiator, but is only triggered by the notes at the start, is a really nice sound. Let's get rid of that delay. Okay, so it can also be triggered by the LFO. So how's that going to sound? If I slow the LFO down, we'll hear. So each time the LFO clocks, we get a trigger over here. And I can shape the envelope. So the envelope becomes like a looping envelope fired at the speed of the LFO, which is really, again, kind of really nice feature you wouldn't think was hidden away in the 101. So you can kind of draw your own LFO shapes. So get some mileage out of this gate trig, gate and LFO. You get more than you bargain for with this synth when you get your head around this bit. So that's really the core of the machine. Next we've got pitch. A nice thing has to be said about the Model 82, this. That switch behaves like the real one does. On a typical digital emulation, that would just be a clear click, up an octave, down an octave, down an octave. You can hear if I put the arpeggiator on, one sec. And then wiggle this. Can you hear it going? That's kind of how the real switch works. So they're actually really beautiful bit of modelling there. And it's these little wonky things that make real analog synths that much more fun than the copies normally. But this one does it. So that's good. So basically, just an octave shifter like you'd have on your own little 2-octave controller keyboard. Fine-tuning. Portamento, that can be either on all the time. Let's turn the arpeggiator off a sec. So always on. Or an auto, where if I don't overlap the notes, things still play normally, but if I overlap them, we've got portamento time, obviously. And if we don't want it, turn it off. We've got an arpeggiator we've already seen, very straightforward, down, up and down, or up. They're your pattern choices, and so I hold a few notes. The clock is set over here by the LFO. What that actually means is quite handy. It means that your LFO is synced to your arpeggiator. So a very simple and quick trick you can do on the 101 and the Model 82 indeed. Set the LFO to random, close the frequency halfway, modulate the filter, and each note has a randomly chosen filter setting, which is great. And that still works in tempo mode as well. So that's the arpeggiator, really straightforward. The sequencer, a little more complicated, but again, not really. This was a very exciting thing to have on a mono synth back in '82, but it's nothing really special these days. But it's still fun. You simply load in notes by pressing load. It's a step time sequencer. It doesn't listen to your timing, just the notes you tap in. So if I tap in like 8 notes now, I'm just going to turn that modulation off because it's confusing us a little bit, confusing me at least. So that's 8 notes loaded in. I'll turn the load off now and then press play. I can change the tempo to be either free running or synchronized to Ableton, in which case I need to play it. It's pretty much that simple. You've got a rest function and legato if you want to sustain any notes or leave gaps. Apart from that, we've got key hold. So when I was using the arpeggiator before, I could have quickly shown you this. I can hold the keys down without having to keep my fingers on the keyboard. And finally, transpose. If I want to move a sequence around, I press transpose, play, and then just press keys up and down the keyboard, and it moves the sequence to the appropriate key I've played. Here we've got some little extra sections. We've got a doubling control, not on the original 101, but it's very nice to have on the 82. Quite similar to the Juno chorus, essentially just a couple of detuned versions of the same synth. And we've got a really good overdrive. Other than that, down here we've got some controls for the bend. It can be either sweeping the pitch or the filter. And then rather than having the modulation on a wheel as usual, we just got a trigger button. And that just sets the vibrato into the VCO again. So before I finish, I did say I'd head back to this section over here. We've got simply controls for velocity and aftertouch routed to either the filter or the volume. MIDI modulation mode, which decides whether or not your 101 mimics a proper modulation wheel, so you want continuous, or whether it just clicks on and off, which is the way the hand controller attached to the 101 used to handle modulation, just simply on or off. And lastly, back where we started, what color 101 do you want? And again, that's probably the most important choice you're going to make. Compared to 95% of what's in the market, it's incredibly restricted, but nonetheless, it sounds like the real thing, and the real thing earned its keep for years and still does today. So take it for a play, see what you think. Okay, so we've looked at Softube's Model 82. How can you do a 101 on another piece of software? I'm going to do something in Sonic Academy's Anna 2 now and show you how you can get the same vibe. First thing, most important, 101 has a single oscillator. That oscillator gives you a number of different waveforms, a saw, the square, and a sub, that you can mix the levels of, but they're all coming from a single oscillator. That's different to like Anna, which has 3 oscillators all doing their own thing. So how are we going to fix that? First thing is, I'm going to use each oscillator in Anna as one of the waveforms. So I'm going to use a saw in 1, I'm going to use the square out of 2, and although Anna's got a sub oscillator, just to keep things simple, I'm going to use 3 as the sub oscillator, and I'm going to grab the square again. And I can drop that down 1 or 2 octaves according to what I fancy, because that's one of the switches on the 101. So all three, let's switch them on. You just want a single voice on each. You do not want to go into double, triple, etc., unless you want to try and copy that doubling effect from the Model 82. If you're trying to copy a real 101, just a single voice for each, okay? So we've now got a saw, a square, a sub. They're all turned up. Let's see how that sounds. Well, it's okay, but it's not quite right. If you listen, I'll turn the sub off a second and make it really clear. Can you hear that? Every time I'm triggering that note, it's getting a different tone. And that's because the waveforms aren't in phase, right? Every time this waveform is triggered off, it's not starting at the same point on that sort of wiggly-waggly cycle that waveforms like to do. With a one oscillator design like the 101, because all those waveforms are coming off a single circuit, they're always perfectly in phase. So we need to fix that, and we do that this way. Retrig, retrig, and retrig. And if you listen now, it's dependably always the same sound. I can bring that sub back in, and you'll hear what a fat thing we got. So that's the core thing straight away to get the 101 vibe going. Get the oscillators, the saw, the square, the sub, drop down an octave or 2 with the square, set them to retrig every time you hit a note. Okay, next is the filter. Pretty straightforward. In Anna 2, we have a model of the Roland filter called Roly. You can hear straight away we've got some of this 101 vibe, quite a lot of it really. Another simple trick, make sure you're in mono. Kill the polyphony as well. If you want to get the sliding legato trick, you can put some portamento in and then put legato on, and it will play without a slide unless you overlap. Okay, I'll turn that out for now, but that's how you do that. Arpeggiator, very straightforward. If you want to use it, don't use it polyphonically. The Anna arpeggiator can play multiple notes at once. Now, your mono setting should defeat that anyway, but it's going to confuse things, so don't do that. You've got a single envelope on the 101, so you can either just use the amplifier envelope and use that as your mod for things like the filter, or if you want to keep using the filter envelope for the filter and the amplifier for the sound, to be like really authentically 101, they've got to be on the same settings, okay? When you switch the amplifier envelope out into that gate mode where it's just note on, note off, it's basically this. Let's turn the arpeggiator off a sec. So that's the same as turning the amplifier envelope into gate mode, just instant on, instant off, full sustain. And we can now use the filter envelope like the 101's own envelope. So we've got a nice, fat, clicky analog bass there. Last thing to look at is LFO. There's a single LFO, and it's sent to a number of different places, including the pitch fine. I would send that for the vibrato effect. And then it can either go to the filter cutoff, in which case you want to send that to filter 1, or it can go to the pulse width of the square wave, which we've got currently on oscillator 2. So let's do that. Okay, so I'm going to have plenty of depth on the LFO, and then the destination for each of those parameters is controlled here. So now, that's the vibrato, and that is the pulse width. You can also send the modifying envelope, the filter here, to the pulse width. So again, if you want to, you can make an assignment from pulse width of the square wave oscillator 2 to the filter envelope, and then you can control that in the mod matrix. So with it off and button with it on. And if I mess with the filter envelope, you'll hear. And that's the majority of the settings. If you want to, you can start looking at stuff like key tracking the filter, which is done over here, the key setting. Bring it down to 0, you've got none of the filter key tracking, it's flat across the keyboard. Or you can put it onto full. And you can hear it opening up there on the higher notes. And there you go, a basic 101 patch ready for you to mess with on Anna 2 in the space of about 3 minutes. Hope you enjoyed today's course. It's part of the Sonic Academy Synthwave takeover this month. If you enjoyed this, head over to Sonic and have a look at all the 80s synth madness.
Thanks everyone for watching. We really appreciate the support from you guys. If you liked this video, then smash that like button. And if you want to be notified about new content, hit the subscribe and the bell notifications. Peace!